The Urantia book presents the Lucifer Rebellion as a system-wide ideological secession led by Lucifer, the system sovereign of Satania, and advanced through a declaration of liberty that reframes liberty as self-assertion, contests universe authority, and attacks the Ascension training program for evolutionary mortals. The narrative emphasizes that the root cause is ultimately located in Lucifer's own mind and pride, while also stating that the exact causes cannot be fully pinpointed. Chronologically, the open proclamation of the Lucifer Declaration of Liberty is dated to about 200,000 years ago Urantia time, at an annual conclave on the Sea of Glass on Jerusem. The rebellion drew in a portion of system leadership, notably 37 planetary princes, triggered quarantine or isolation procedures, and unfolded as a war in heaven that is explicitly non-physical, fought in terms of life eternal, persuasion, loyalty, and moral choosing, rather than bodily combat.
Urantia's planetary crisis is framed as a direct derivative of this system rebellion. Caligastia, Urantia's planetary prince, pre-consented to betrayal after being briefed by Satan, then attempted to seize sovereignty. The Urantia book describes 7 crucial years in which loyalists, Van and the modified mortal Amadon, with loyal midwayers and seraphic support, resisted while system and planetary circuits were severed. Post-rebellion Urantia enters a prolonged probationary rehabilitation regime and a complex supervisory arrangement, Most High Observer, Resident Governor-General, and special commissions, while the larger Satania case remains pending final adjudication in super-universe courts. In its theological framing, the Urantia book repeatedly uses the rebellion to interpret questions of free will, mercy, and justice, especially why rebellious leaders were not immediately destroyed. It argues for time lags as mercy-serving intervals that protect creature free will and allow full clarification of moral choices, while also noting that a first hearing in the case Gabriel versus Lucifer had begun on Eureka at the time of the revelations, and that subsequent restrictions, including Satan's confinement, followed.
Lucifer is described as a brilliant primary Lananondec son of Amadon, distinguished for administrative ability, who became the system sovereign of Satania, ruling from Jerusem over a system of 607 inhabited worlds. The text frames his later rebellion as an embrace of sin via a sophistry of spurious personal liberty, and it places the Satania event among only 3 such system sovereign failures in Amadon's history. After Lucifer and his first assistant, Satan, had reigned for more than 500,000 years, they began to internally array themselves against the Universal Father and his then vicegerent son, Michael. The account explicitly denies that external conditions forced rebellion and instead asserts that the idea was not suggested to Lucifer by others. It originated in Lucifer's own mind, developing through self-assertion, internal dissatisfaction, and eventual open disloyalty. For more than 100 years of standard time, the Union of Days on Salvington reportedly communicated to Eureka that all was not well in Lucifer's mind, and this was also communicated to Michael and to the constellation leadership. Just days before the public proclamation, Gabriel's visit to Jerusem confronted Lucifer's first overt expression of disloyalty. Gabriel then consulted Urantia leadership regarding prospective open rebellion.
The narrative states that it is very difficult to identify the exact cause or causes culminating in rebellion, insisting only that its beginnings were in Lucifer's mind and that pride nourished self-deception. Over time, Lucifer's trajectory is described as shifting from pride-driven error into deliberate sin, with mercy opportunities offered, including through Faithful of Days interventions presenting Michael's plan, and repeatedly rejected by the principal leaders.
Separate Urantian narratives locate Caligastia's arrival on Urantia about 500,000 years ago, concurrent with the appearance of the Sangic races. In a general framing of planetary prince epics, the text emphasizes that on Urantia, early in the planetary prince regime, Caligastia cast his lot with the rebellion of the system's sovereign Lucifer, and that the planet pursued a stormy course thereafter. The outbreak is crystallized in the Lucifer Declaration of Liberty, framed under three heads. Number 1, denial of the reality of the Universal Father and reinterpreting gravity and energy as inherent while treating the Father as a myth enabling Paradise Sun rule. Number 2, repudiation of Michael's authority to assume sovereignty in the Father's name and opposition to super-universe interference by the Ancients of Days. Number 3, an attack on the morality and purpose of the Ascension training program for mortals, casting it as exploitative and fictional. This declaration is presented as the ideological engine that launches the rebellion.
The manifesto is issued at the annual Conclave of Satania on Jerusem's Sea of Glass about 200,000 years ago, Urantia time, with Satan proclaiming that worship might be accorded universal forces, but allegiance belongs to Lucifer as present ruler. The rebellion's battle cry is self-assertion, paired with arguments for equality of mind and locally bounded government. Lucifer promises planetary princes supreme executive rule and organizes alternative legislative and judicial structures under rebel jurisdiction. The system cabinet joins Lucifer in a body, establishing a new administration of liberated worlds and systems. The narrative also depicts Lucifer using the lack of immediate punitive action, mercy delays, as evidence of governmental impotence, while Gabriel publicly maintains that loyalty is to remain voluntary and sophistry-proof. At outbreak, Michael consults Emmanuel and announces non-interference as policy. A key cosmological legal claim is that, at the time of this rebellion, there was no absolute and personal sovereign authority in Amadon because Michael had not completed his bestowal career and had not yet been vested with unqualified sovereignty. Accordingly, the narrative frames a long period in which rebels are allowed to run a free course from outbreak until Michael's enthronement as sovereign, almost 200,000 years of Urantia time. In operational terms, Gabriel assumes command of loyal hosts, symbolically presenting Michael's banner. The conflict is then explicitly defined as non-physical, centered on argument, exposure of sophistries, and moral decision among personalities. The war is nevertheless described as very terrible and very real, fought in terms of eternal survival rather than bodily injury. The rebellion is system-wide. 37 planetary princes swing their administrations to Lucifer, with Panoptia singled out as a world whose people remain loyal under Melchizedek guidance. Interplanetary communications are suspended. The Satania system is isolated in constellation and universe circuits, with messages carried only by agents such as seraphim and solitary messengers. The text itemizes significant losses among lower orders, seraphim, associated cherubim, material sons, and midway creatures, while emphasizing that no Jerusem resident ascendant mortals participate in the rebellion. After over 2 years of system time from the beginning of the war in heaven, Lucifer's successor arrives and is installed. This event is marked by administrative stabilization and by dethroning the rebels from governing power. However, the text says no local universe tribunal could then detain or destroy Lucifer, because Michael was not yet a sovereign ruler. Thus, Lucifer and associates are allowed for a time to roam Jerusem and even individual worlds, continuing efforts of deception, although no new worlds are lost during this period. Later descriptions identify the present system sovereign as Lanaforge, successor to the apostate Lucifer, and characterize continuing emergency administrative arrangements in Satania as an expanded staff made necessary by the rebellion. Urantia's betrayal is framed as premeditated. After Caligastia has governed Urantia for 300,000 years, Satan arrives on a periodic inspection and informs Caligastia of Lucifer's proposed Declaration of Liberty. Caligastia agrees to betray Urantia upon announcement. Shortly after, Caligastia attempts a political seizure, proclaiming himself absolute sovereign and demanding council abdication. Van objects and seeks appeal to Jerusem and orders return, designating Caligastia as supreme sovereign while demanding allegiance. Urantia then experiences abrupt isolation as system circuits are severed, forcing all present celestial groups into a decision between loyalty and rebellion. Elsewhere, the Urantia book names the tertiary universe circuit supervisor, Ondavantia, as the one who isolated Urantia at the time of the betrayal during the testing seasons of the Lucifer Rebellion. For more than 7 years, Urantia undergoes the crisis while personalities make final decisions before higher authorities intervene. The text describes a loyal settlement protected by loyal midwayers and connected to custody of the Tree of Life, reserved for loyal staff and associates. Among the internal heroes, Amadon is named as the outstanding human hero of the Lucifer Rebellion, steadfast alongside Van against Dalagastia's sophistries, and this loyalty is framed as spiritually decisive despite limited intellectual advantage. Once the last decision is made, a Most High and emergency Melchizedeks arrive to seize authority and inaugurate a probationary rehabilitation era.
Post-rebellion, Urantia's administrative cultural systems collapse. Confusion near Dalmatia persists for decades, and a catastrophic inundation occurs 162 years after the rebellion, submerging the planetary headquarters and obliterating much cultural progress. The narrative also traces long-term governance by Melchizedek receivers and the continuing work of Van and Amadon until the Adamic era, describing prolonged rehabilitation and scattered civilized outposts. In Paper 66's retrospective, Caligastia is described as having been warned, having gone into darkness at the time of the Lucifer Rebellion, and as later having his authority progressively curtailed, especially by Machiventa's incarnation and finally by Michael's life in the flesh. The text denies that a personal devil could coerce normal human minds against free will. The Urantia book connects the decisive systemic turning point to Michael's mortal bestowal. It states that Lucifer and Satan roamed Satania until the completion of Michael's bestowal mission, and that they were last on Urantia during their combined assault on the Son of Man. A detailed episode places a climactic universe trial near the end of Jesus' Mount Hermon sojourn. Satan, representing Lucifer, and Caligastia appear, making proposals centered on universe sovereignty rather than physical temptations. Jesus refuses compromise and commits judgment to the Ancients of Days. The text then asserts that when Jesus descended from Mount Hermon, the Lucifer Rebellion in Satania and the Caligastia secession on Urantia were virtually settled, with Michael's sovereignty acquisition enabling future rebellions to be handled summarily. In Paper 53's framing, the bestowal terminated the Lucifer Rebellion in all Satania aside from the planets of the apostate planetary princes.
After Michael becomes the settled head of Amadon, Lucifer is taken into custody and confined to prison worlds, while Caligastia remains on Urantia but is described as unable to invade minds or souls without consent or desire. Michael petitions the Ancients of Days to intern all personalities concerned pending rulings in Gabriel versus Lucifer, said to have been placed on Uversa's records almost 200,000 years ago. The petition is granted with an exception allowing Satan periodic visits to apostate princes until adjudication begins. At the time of the revelations, the text reports that a first hearing has occurred on Uversa and that a mandate follows confining Satan to prison worlds, ending Satan's visits to fallen worlds. The system circuits are stated to remain unreinstated so long as Lucifer lives, with final disposition awaiting super-universe decree. Within Urantia-specific governance, the world remains supervised through layered regimes influenced by rebellion conditions, including Most High observers and commissions, and some statements explicitly anticipate that changes may occur at the final adjudication of the Lucifer Rebellion.